Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire. And this week we have a very special guest, someone that I found from Facebook and I wanted to know more about. And that's a man by the name of Sean Bossman, who is an accomplished independent wrestling manager like myself and wrestling commentator plus author and fellow Atari enthusiast, which we'll talk about a little bit. I may have scared my other co-host away because I said, we're going to talk a lot about the Atari computer. And they're like, I don't know anything about it. And it's like, I'm one of the biggest Atari computer enthusiasts I think you'll ever find. But we'll talk about that in just a tiny little bit. So anyway, Sean, tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're located.
Well, I'm currently located in the Cincinnati area, greater Cincinnati area. That's where I'm currently staying. I'm looking to move elsewhere. I haven't made any decisions at the moment, but at the moment, this is where I'm pretty much rooted. And I have a lot of family members here, so that's kind of weighing in on my decision if I want to move or not. It's more for career reasons why I'd want to move. But
did you grow up in Ohio?
You what?
Did you grow up in Ohio?
No, actually, I grew up in Kentucky.
Well, not that there's that much of a difference since I've been Cincinnati and Kentucky are pretty much joined at the hip there. But so tell me about how you got started in professional wrestling.
Well, my start in pro wrestling was actually kind of a strange one. I didn't go to a wrestling school or I didn't know anybody like most people do. My father, who worked in radio most of his life, way back before the internet. So those of you who don't know, there was a time that there was no internet. He had this huge book, bigger than the Yellow Pages or anything. Fans may not even know what Yellow Pages are, but they were full of all of these numbers for production companies, Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, etc., for that he could contact for advertisement on radio and so forth. And I used to call a lot of those places. I was young and stupid and thinking, well, if I give them an idea for a movie, they'll make a movie. And well, anyways, I was going through, I found World Wrestling Federation. And I called there and I talked to a couple people and somebody said that Coliseum Video would be more likely to hear my stories. And although I didn't get the number, but I looked at it in my dad's book and sure enough, Coliseum Video was there. So I called and I spoke to a gentleman whose name, unfortunately, I have long forgotten. I've got it written down somewhere, but, in this mess, the multiple times I've moved, I don't know where it is. But he was really enthralled by all of my imagination and my dedication to wrestling and my knowledge of the wrestling history. And he would like to pick my brain a lot because he said that they had just changed over from their old formula where they would release 3 tapes at a time, best of the WWF, one dedicated to one individual like Hulkamania or Rowdy Piper's greatest hits, and then a specialty one which was bloopers, bleeps, and body slams and things like that.
I remember those.
Well, they had changed over. There were no after 20 rounds of it, they didn't want to do the best of the WWF anymore, so they started making them more individual and sporadic.
Like Roddy Piper and Hogan and they all had their own individual tapes. I remember seeing those too.
Yeah, but by the early 90s, they were getting away from that. They still did them occasionally, but they just kind of, each tape had its own theme, and they kind of played off that more than the actual wrestling. And he told me that the gentleman I was speaking with said that one of the things they had problems with were coming up with new titles and themes. And I gave him a lot of ideas, and he really liked it. And they used some of my ideas, and they sent me a bunch of free Coliseum videos, which I didn't know at the time, but that was kind of compensation. So they can say they didn't steal my ideas. But I called back and thanked him, and we went through the whole thing again. He would go back to pick my brain, look for more ideas. More of them got used. I got more free tapes. I now have boxes of Coliseum videos for all the time. And I did this for about 6 years, and that's really kind of where I got my start, creating themes and titles for the WWF tapes from Coliseum Video.
I have a small story about Coliseum Video, which is that a good friend of mine worked at a video store, and Coliseum called to send a representative over there to sell a bunch of videos to a store, and they sent Hillbilly Jim over. So my friend calls me up and says, "Hey, I know you're a big fan of wrestling. I got Hillbilly Jim right here on the phone with me." So I chatted on the phone for about 10 minutes with Hillbilly Jim. And I said I was a big fan of his. I said, I go back to when you were Harley Race. He said, "Gosh darn it, you know more about my career than I do." He's a very friendly guy, very friendly guy. So that's my Coliseum video relatable for you. So
he's definitely a great guy, always friendly. I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about Hillbilly Jim.
No, he was really nice to me on the phone and took some time out to chat with me. So from the Coliseum gig, how did that turn into you becoming a professional wrestling manager?
Well, actually, I'm not a manager.
Oh, okay.
I do ring announcing.
Oh, ring announcing. I'm sorry. Yes.
Interviews, things like that. But although I have been asked to manage before, but I don't think I would get as many bookings, is it? Because most people have their own managers. If they bring wrestlers in, their managers will manage them rather than bringing managers to another. Some are able to get around, but there's not as many spots for managers, and so I've never done that.
These days, especially because it's become such an old lost art, you know.
Sadly, it has been. There's still some good ones out there. But David Barnabas Spector, a good friend of mine, he's one of my favorite managers out there right now.
Okay, and what Fed is he with?
He also works on the independent scene, and let's say I've worked with him most recently on I believe it was Battle on the Border Pro Wrestling. It was in, I believe that event was in Morrow, Ohio, a couple of months, or 1 or 2 months ago, not very long ago. But I see him occasionally. We've actually traveled together. We've traveled to Texas together, so forth, and worked on some events. So he's a pretty good guy, and I always like to throw his name out there. Hopefully, if anybody's looking for a manager on the independent scene, that they will look him up and bring him in.
Or you can always get Buddy Sotelo to come represent.
There you go.
Yeah, but I don't think most people want to fly me out from California to. Plus, these days, and that is one of the things is that, you know, as an announcer, you probably never had to take a bump. I sure hope you didn't.
Oh no, I definitely have had to.
Oh, really?
I've also done refereeing as well, and I was a wrestler for a little while as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me about all those things.
Well, I became a professional wrestler, just kind of, you know, like some other people do. They get in the business doing something else. They see everybody else wrestling. They hear the roar of the crowd. They want part of it. And so I went through all the training. I became I was already doing the commentating and the ring announcing, and I went through the training, and I did wrestle a handful of matches, but it became quickly obvious, something that I already knew but denied for a minute. I'm not an athlete. I'm much better behind the mic. Not that I wasn't trained well, and I learned how to do everything, but it was extremely difficult for me. I know a lot of guys who are like, their athleticism is unbelievably natural to them. It's second nature. Or I had to think so hard that I wasn't enjoying myself at all.
Well, then there's the pain tolerance part of it.
Well, like I said, I only worked a handful of matches, but I still had an injury to my left knee. So yeah, I even in my short career, I had my own injury as well. I hyperextended my knee when I took a spine buster.
Ooh.
He was a heavy set guy, and he went to do the spine buster. My foot got caught on his thigh, and when I went down flat footed.
Oh.
My knee hyperextended. But I knew I was injured, but I didn't feel any pain, and I finished the match. And
the next day,
no,
Oh.
No. Then I was working third shift. I went to my shoot job at the time, and this was years ago. And after I got out of my car and I had to walk across this huge parking lot, it started to wear on me. And by the time I got to the building, I had to hold on to something to walk.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I got clocked in. I got over to my station, but I tried for like a minute, and I was like, and I had to find the manager and say, I can't do this. I have to go home.
Oh my gosh! Wow. And then, so what feds have you worked for?
Well, of course, I worked for Coliseum Video, as we mentioned, so kind of WWF through there. I was a columnist for the AWA in its last days. I've done ring announcing for the NWA, also for Coastal Championship Wrestling. I've worked for
That's funny. I worked for CCW also. I worked for CC, but it was California Championship
oh,
Wrestling.
okay, gotcha.
So I remember looking up the California Championship Wrestling and trying to find it, to
Yeah.
see if there was someone else with CCW. And that's where I found out about Coastal Championship Wrestling.
Oh, that's probably the fastest rising independent company right now. They're expanding in a massive way. I know other plans they have to expand further into the country. They've already gone from, I mean, they started in Florida, they've gone to the Midwest, they've gone into California, so they're coast to coast already, and now it's just how frequently they're going to run all these spots. Um, so it's I'm always cheering them on. They're looking to do things in a big way, and they're expanding faster than any other independent company right now.
Great, great. So, but like, what local feds do you work with?
Local feds. Let's see. Right now, I'm working. The two biggest ones I'm working for are Dynamic Championship Wrestling, which is out of the uh, Dayton, Troy, uh, Springfield, Piqua area in Ohio, and then Battle on the Border Pro Wrestling, which is out of the Harrison, Indiana, Ohio borderline, hence Battle on
Oh,
the Border, and they're also expanding as well, albeit locally. And I've worked for many other companies over the years in the area.
okay. And like, tell me like one of your highlights, maybe like one of your favorite matches that you announced when you were working.
My favorites that I announce or just in general?
Well, how about ones that you announced?
Let's see. Well, I always enjoy um, announcing someone like Wildcat Chris Harris, close friend of mine, and uh, whenever he got back in the whenever he would get back in the ring, because several times he thought, I'm done, I'm not gonna wrestle anymore. But then the fire is still burning, and I'd always encourage him. So whenever he got back in the ring, I always loved to announce him. I like announcing people who I work with a lot, so I can give everybody their own individual introduction. Like instead of a generic introduction for each single person, I'll take their persona and I'll add that into my my introduction. Like there's a gentleman, a Hollywood Adam Swayze. Instead of saying Hollywood Adam Swayze, like some people would do, he was at least at the time a very egotistical individual, and I worked with him not too long ago. It seems like he's changed his tune a bit, but I would add that ego into my announcement. Hollywood Adam Swayze, and he put his hands like his name was in lights. Hollywood Adam Swayze, and it was uh, another individual who cut himself the 22-year-old stud. And before I would say his name, the 22-year-old stud, I'd emphasize that because that was his gimmick, even though he was gray haired and not
Yeah,
clearly not 22. But
yeah.
that was his new gimmick. He was trying to be young, and his music and his outfits were all outdated. They were 90s stuff, even though it was 20 years ago by then.
Well, he was 22 once, I guess.
Yeah, everybody was 22
So
once.
some people just they don't age gracefully. But did you have you announced any big names?
Oh yes, I've announced uh, Gangrel. I've announced Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Gangrel's a nice guy. I've worked some shows with him. He's a really nice guy.
Yes, he definitely is. I've announced some AWA guys, or not AWA, but excuse me, AEW guys, such as QT Marshall and Brian Cage.
Brian Cage is what I've worked shows with him. Also a nice guy. Like
Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, although he didn't wrestle, he was there. I got to announce him, and quite a few other ones. Shark Boy, Marty Jannetty, Honky Tonk Man.
It was on my first show. The very first show I worked was with the Honky Tonk Man. So the 6 degrees of separation. We've got more than just a few links between the two of us in where we've worked with. So so how do you get ready to announce in a show? Because the interesting thing is that my brother, I brought him into CCW and he was the CCW announcer. And I was a manager, but we never let anyone know that we were brothers. It was like the Lanny Poffo, Randy Savage thing. We never told anyone. But my brother did announcing. I only did announcing for one show, and I actually thought it was a lot more work than I intended. It was kind of harder than being a manager in a lot of ways.
Well, one thing about being a ring announcer is you've got to make sure you get everybody's name right. My biggest fear is that I'm going to mispronounce somebody's name or mispronounce the town. And it's I have made that mistake before, and it is humiliating, and usually the wrestlers will let you have it if you do. Although I did not do as bad as what was his name? Al Monte is the name he went by.
Yes.
Dynamic Wrestling Alliance. It was a promotion for the late Johnny Diamond, one of my greatest friends in this business. God rest his soul. But Al Monte, Rikishi was the big name for the show, and Al announced.
I managed against him in a show also, but continue.
And Al announced him as Rishiki.
Ooh.
And so Rikishi came, grabbed him in a headlock, put him against the rope. What's my name? What's my name? And Al was like trying to look at his cards, but he couldn't get his arm over because he was holding them, and the crowd just laughing at Al.
He's lucky he didn't get the stink face.
But oh yeah, good thing he didn't.
Yeah, you mess with Rikishi too much, and you'll get a big.
Well, I was the referee in that match, and he asked the crowd if he should give it to me. Fortunately, Rikishi's opponent got it, but yeah.
But the crowd probably wanted you to get it, so it's probably.
Oh, yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And
tell me about
I've ever bumped before. As a referee, I was the bumping referee when.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, like I said, since I was trained to be a wrestler, whenever I came out in the stripes, you could hear from the crowd, "Uh-oh, ref bump!" Everybody knew. It didn't take them long to catch on to that.
Tell me some of the ref bumps that you took.
Oh my God. Well, probably the biggest one was when I was refereeing Demolition versus Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine.
Oh wow, nice.
And this is actually on video. This was actually recorded.
Was this at an indie show?
Yes, it was at the Dynamic Wrestling Alliance. The after the match was called a double disqualification, and when the timing was running out, there was like 30 seconds left or something like that, and the ring announcer Al Monte again said, 10 minutes remain, and Beefcake was like really pissed off. 10 minutes? What the hell? The whole match was 10 minutes. And, no, 20 minutes, whatever it was, but it definitely wasn't 10 minutes left. And he's like really pissed off, and so then they're going outside, they're swinging chairs and stuff like that. I'm trying to maintain order, and Beefcake just says, "Just ring the damn bell, will ya?" And so I called for the bell. Bell didn't ring. Almighty says, "This match is officially over." And so the crowd was like, what the hell? What's going on? And so, kind of left it unsatisfactory. So Greg Valentine comes up from behind, clips the back of my knee. And so I go down real quick. He comes over, pulls me over, and Demolition grabbed my leg as Beefcake comes out of nowhere, drops an elbow on me. And
wow.
Valentine drops an elbow on me. 2 great pictures of that one. The Beefcake one, you can see me begging off Demolition, and I don't even know Beefcake's coming. He's up in the air. And the Valentine one's perfect impact. I get pulled up, I get chopped. Demolition Axe throws me on the ground, and I'm thinking, oh, thank God that's over with. And so I get back to my feet. I turn around. Beefcake's got his hedge clippers. He's like, "You better get out of the ring. You better get out of the ring."
Yeah.
Grab the top rope, slide underneath. Bill Eadie's there. Bam! Right around my throat. Right around my throat. Chokes me out on the apron. Throws me back in there. I'm like, holy shit. Not my language. Where do I go? And Valentine goes over and grabs me and uh, whips me into Beefcake and puts me in the sleeper. I'm out. Get my hair cut. And I had a head full of hair for that match. You can see it. I told you it's recorded. It never did grow back.
That's why I never did a head shave match. Some people brought it up, and I've said I would never do that just because of that very, my hair is here, but it's I was always afraid of something like that happening.
Yeah, but that's actually what happened. Is it was when it was growing back, I had this bald spot in the back, and it just kept, then it would go back, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I'm like, so I've always kind of blamed Brutus Beefcake for my hair. That's been my excuse.
Wow.
And I apologize again for the swear word.
No. Look, it's on. It's after 10 o'clock out on the out where you're at. So there's no children listening. So we'll be fine with that. Look, I have a talk show, a podcast with ex wrestlers on here. You think I haven't heard people swear before? It's for some wrestlers, getting words in between the swear words is the big challenge.
I know people just like that.
Let's put it this way. I managed the Reno Scum for a little while. So, yeah. In fact, they got their name, the Reno Scum, working with Buddy Sotelo over at California Championship Wrestling. We would bring them in from Reno to wrestle for us in California, and we'd say, oh, the Reno guys are coming all the time. We kept saying the Reno guys, and they're like, we're not the Reno guys, we're the Reno Scum. And it's like, okay, that works perfect. So, Adam Thornstowe and Lust of the Legend, and I don't know if they ever worked Malachi into the typical Reno Scum stuff that they did with MLW. But anyway, so now the other thing that I was very intrigued about is that you wrote a book about Hulk Hogan.
No, I did not.
I thought you had written. Did you on your website? You feature that Hulk Hogan.
I made a website.
Oh, okay. It's a website dedicated to Hulk Hogan's history.
Yeah. And that's it. HulkHoganHistory.weebly.com.
Okay. And I did go and check that out, and was so. What motivated you to do that website?
Well, after the Coliseum video stint ended in '97, that's when WWE decided to open their own home video department, WWF.com, or not WWF.com, WWF Home Video, I mean. And once the Coliseum video stint ended, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? And right around that same time, that's when a new phenomena was coming up. It started in the 80s with remember the 900 numbers? 1-900, 909, 9900.
99 cents a minute.
Yep. Well, like $3 for the first minute, then
right. In case you just pick it up and hang up right away. Yes, they still dings you for $3.
And then locally, people were using what's called standalone mailboxes. Do you remember those?
No, I don't.
They were like digital answering machines.
Yeah.
Call a number and it would be just like an answering machine type of thing.
Yeah.
Just like the voicemail you have on your phone now, except you had to call a separate number. And people were using those, getting those because you could get them for free. And they were doing reports on local wrestling. And some of the people we had doing that, like the Informer and Joe Berg and a number of other guys, and they would pretty much talk about what happened on local shows. And they gave you some good information, who wrestled, who won, when the next show is going to be. And they were kind of popular around here. But I always felt the guys were boring who were doing it. There was no character, there was no excitement. It didn't make the shows feel fun or worth going to. And I just got an idea. Well, heck, I can do better than that. So I went and got my own standalone mailbox, and I started thinking, okay, what can I do different? And I thought, oh, well, obviously I'm going to be a character. I'm going to be a heel character. And what was going on in wrestling that was popular? Well, that was '97, so the NWO. And so I became this ultimate Hulk Hogan fan. I mean, I credited Hulk Hogan with everything. It doesn't matter what it was. I came up with a way to give credit to Hulk Hogan. I would always say Hulk Hogan is God. It says in the Bible, Hollywood Hogan, the man whose feet our lips shall touch. But unfortunately, you can't find it because everybody opens the Bible, they tear out that first page so they can keep it with them, and that was my excuse why you can't find it in the Bible. And it became very popular because of my personality, and a lot of people would try to leave messages to stump me or claim that I was wrong, and then the next day I would answer it with, no matter how off the wall it was, it kind of made sense on its own level, like Bugs Bunny stuffing a carrot up Elmer Fudd's gun and it backfires. Well, that's absurd, but it makes sense on a cartoon level, and that's what I would do, and it was so much fun, and people liked it, and people started calling me from other states. And don't forget, this was before the internet. Well, internet was in its infancy then, and so it had to go word of mouth. Hey, you got to call this guy. You got to call this guy. And I'm getting calls from Texas, from California, from Washington State, from Las Vegas, which is where I met how I met Bill Brown, a promoter, another good friend of mine in this business. I used to run the Florida Championship Wrestling area, and through him I met so many other people as well. But it's like, and I did that for several years until the uh, internet became uh, really really popular, and it was faster than the call-in lines, because I can only do that once a day at most. But internet, you could be on there 7, 10, 12 hours a day, however long you wanted to be, and be involved. So then the hotlines kind of lost their luster. But after that started to go away, I had all this Hogan information because all these updates I would do, I had to always say something about Hogan, today in Hogan history. And so I just decided to make a website with all that information. And it came out quite well. And then I added more to it later, like hospital history and music history and everything that was related to Hulk Hogan that I could find.
Have you actually seen him wrestle?
Oh, yeah, many times.
Okay,
I
okay,
saw the
good.
last leg drop in Memphis, Tennessee.
Really? Okay, that's a part of it. Have you actually met Hulk Hogan?
Yes, I have.
Oh, you have. Tell me about that.
Nice guy. I don't understand where you see people online saying that he's a horrible person or anything. I've met him several times. He's always been so nice to me, so polite. Um, I don't think he even knows that I'm the guy that made the website.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if he knew that you'd
I
done.
don't think he does. I don't know if he's ever seen it, but the other fans that I saw him with, he was always incredibly nice and polite, and said thank you and all this, and so I don't and very complimentary. So I don't know what experiences other people had, but he was always good to me.
How'd you get all the results for every like a major opponent that he had, like Sergeant Slaughter, for instance?
Well, some of them were easy, like since the pay-per-views and stuff like that, those were all easy. The rest of it just took a lot of research. I would look for Hulk Hogan dates and uh, for today in Hulk Hogan history, who did he wrestle and where, and then sometimes while I'm looking for that, I will find results to it. And of course, there's Madison Square Garden and Toronto's Maple Leaf Garden. A lot of that stuff, Boston Gardens that were actually recorded, house shows that were on the local networks. So I got to see some of those, take those down as well. Other ones were put on websites, so I can't guarantee that all of it is 100%, but it is the most complete Hulk Hogan history you're ever going to find.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed by that. Although, if I could list, if they, of his enemies that you had listed, his big feuds that you have listed there, the one that's missing that I would add on there is the one that he had with Dr. D. David Schultz.
That would be a good one too. Yeah, I keep planning on going back to that one, and I just haven't done it yet because it wouldn't be too hard to do because I've got all those matches listed. I just have to go through them and write them down. I just haven't had time to sit back and do that. Whenever I have time to do anything, I've got to edit wrestling videos. I've got to add commentary to videos. I've got to upload videos. I've got to work the wrestling events themselves. So I don't really have time to do the website anymore like I used to.
Sure. Yeah, but those early feud, a lot of people forget Hogan's early feud with Dr. D. David Schultz was intense. Those guys wound up in the hospital after fighting each other. You
And
know,
don't forget, their feud crossed over first in the AWA and then the WWF. It wasn't just a one little thing and one.
and Japan. And Japan. Those two
Yes,
fought each
yes,
other
they
in
did.
Japan. And apparently one of the Japanese fights, they started potatoing each other and they both wound up in the hospital. So I've
I'd like to
always
see that one.
yeah, well, video being what it is, and who knows if the WWE owns it and would ever release it, but or whatever whatever Fed in Japan has it, that would be really something I'd like to watch. But are you maybe gonna plan maybe doing any other sites, or you just wanted to do one for Hulk and that's it?
Well, I was the social media manager for Micro Championship Wrestling for a while until Johnny Green passed away, and they had their own official website, which was basically said, where we're going to be, how you can book us, and things like that. I wanted to make a second one that was connected to it, that was more fan interactive, had the history of the title, profiles, and stuff like that. And I did make that. Hulk Hogan's mcw.weebly.com, although it was never completed, but it was sufficient enough to where people could look at like the history of the Micro Championship Wrestling Championship and things like that, and the Little Women's Championship and a few profiles. Like I said, I never did complete it because Johnny Green unfortunately passed away. But that was another one of the things I did in wrestling. I was a social media manager there for a while.
Okay. And like what Fed are you working with most now?
Um, the three big ones I'm working with right now are Dynamic Championship Wrestling, Battle on the Border, and Coastal Championship Wrestling.
Okay.
And then
And
I'll pick up another one here and there. Like recently, I worked United Pro Wrestling in North Carolina, and I'll travel. I've traveled to Texas. I've traveled to um, New Mexico. I've traveled to Florida. I've been booked in New York, Las Vegas. I mean, um, but those are all one shots.
do you have anyone ever recognize you when you're not, in at a Fed or not at a show? Has anyone ever come up to recognize you and say, "Hey, you're that announcer that?"
Surprisingly, yes. But even more surprising, even when I was in North Carolina, I had people recognize me, and that was a shocker. I mean, how do people recognize somebody from the greater Cincinnati area? Um, and I was like, but I've had people contact me and ask to book me. I apparently have some kind of following. I don't really know what it is, but I'm always, you know, I'm very humble and very thankful and grateful whenever it happens. But it always surprises me. But
Well, you've received a few awards I saw on your website.
yeah, I've seen a few of them, not as many as others have, but I've received a couple.
That's good. Is any one particular award mean more to you than others? Is there one award that meant a lot to you?
Uh, yes, the Johnny Diamond Lifetime Achievement Award. That was the first one I got, but it means more now because Johnny, as I said earlier, was a great friend of mine in this business, great friend of Bill Brown. He essentially was the father of independent wrestling in the Cincinnati area. All the other companies uh, essentially branched off from him, and after he passed away, the uh, the area really suffered a great loss. And the fact that I
When did
got
he die? When did he die?
he died in February of 20, Uh, when was it? It was 2012.
Oh, okay, so a while ago, but he's been there for a while. What Fed did he start up? Was he
Well,
Dynamic?
he's most famous for starting up the Northern Wrestling Federation. That's the longest running company in this area. I worked there for 8 years myself,
Wow.
and but he retired. He fell ill and got married and so forth. And but in 2008, he decided to make a comeback, and he started up the Dynamic Wrestling Alliance,
Okay.
and that's where I first started working for him.
Great.
And it it was a good time. It was a good time working with Johnny. He was always a nice guy, always um, forgiving, excuse me. And but a lot of people wronged him, but he never held a grudge. And it's not that he forgot, but he forgave.
Now, how do you feel that wrestling is coming back in the Ohio area after COVID? What is your thoughts about that?
Um, well, at this point, it is back. It's what it was before. This area here has always had, well, not always, but in the last, you know, 15 years has had an abundance of independent wrestling, some better than others. I mean, it's, as with anything, the more you have, the more uh, bad eggs are going to be in the bunch. But uh, but between Ohio and Indiana and Kentucky, yeah, it's pretty much completely back. Kentucky has the most strict athletic commission, so you got to have a license for everything in Kentucky. So there aren't as many companies there, but they never was. Ohio has an athletic commission, but it's a little more lenient, so that more people will run there. Indiana, however, has no athletic commission, so anybody can run and do anything they want in Indiana.
California has an athletic commission. I've been a manager for over 15 years, and I've never seen a California athletic commissioner representative show up at any wrestling show, big
I,
or small. They completely ignore us. They exist, but they must have one person for the entire state. They don't.
sounds like Ohio. It's I wish Kentucky would be that lenient.
Wow. So, why do you think Ohio, in particular, is one of the great centers of professional wrestling? I always considered it one of the great territories. What do you think sets Ohio apart from, say, Florida or Milwaukee or Michigan or Wisconsin or California?
I would say probably just well, not necessarily one thing, but the weather. There aren't many natural disasters in this area. Uh, Tornadoes are the worst thing, but only in certain parts, farther up north and farther south. But like right in the middle in the greater Cincinnati area, there aren't very many of them. Flooding is probably the worst thing when it happens, when the Ohio River goes up, and of course further up where the Great Lakes are in Michigan and all that. But weather-wise, it's not that big of a deal. Even when we have a lot of snow, well, a lot for us, it's like minuscule compared to places like New York where houses get buried, and and when there's never a drought. There's humidity. There's humidity here, but people around here are used to that, and it also uh, it's so people like to get out a lot, but since we do have all 4 seasons, we have all four. A lot of times they want to be indoors. They want to get out of the house, but they want to be indoors. So they can be protected from the rain or the snow or the heat or the cold. And professional wrestling gives them an opportunity to do that. So the weather is probably one of the main reasons. Just many many of the location because of that.
So I wanted to, while we have some time, I want to talk to you about the Atari. Tell me about your experience with the Atari.
Well, I'm a first generation gamer. Um, I've had an Atari as long as I can remember. I mean, I think I have memories of when we first got it, or it may just be the earliest memories I have of playing it because I don't remember opening it. But I remember when we got the Heavy Sixer. Well, I later learned it was called the Heavy Sixer. It later became known as the Heavy Sixer, but it was the Sears version of it.
Sears Telegames.
Yeah,
Yep. My uncle had one.
and so the games I had were called Pong Sports instead of Video Olympics, Target Fun instead of Air Sea Battle, Canyon Bomber had the same name. Those were the first three games that I got, and
Tank instead of Combat, I think.
Tank Plus, yeah.
Yeah, Tank Plus.
I got that one. I
Yes.
got that one later. I didn't. That didn't come in my original three, but I got that one shortly thereafter.
And then after that, did you move on to the Atari computer?
No, I didn't get an Atari computer until sometime in the '90s.
So
My
you
dad had, my dad had a friend whose son was getting rid of it and just gave it to my dad, who gave it to me. I went from the Atari 2600 to the Atari 5200 to the Atari 7800, and in the '90s I got the 800 computer, and it had a whole bunch of games. My goodness, it had a whole bunch of games.
I bought mine in 1981 with 16K of RAM. I added the other 32K myself, which made me think like I was a total genius and led to me becoming a computer consultant for the rest of my life. But I just was absolutely in love with the Atari 800. I still am. I still play emulated stuff, on my computer now from the 800. And most of the 800 stuff, the best games, were on the 7800 anyway.
Well, personally, I've always felt that the real Atari experience was the 5200, which is essentially the 800, the 8-bit games. Just the 5200 is simply the console, but it's the game, the program, the graphics are all the same. But I've always felt the real Atari experience because it has better graphics, better sound, better than the 2600, but it's still blocky enough to where it doesn't feel like the arcade. And to me, that was the Atari experience that I loved the most. But I also am a fan of the 7800. I just wish they would have put the Pokey sound chip in that one. The TIA, the 2600 sound chip just doesn't do it.
Well, it does for the 2600 games, but for the later Atari stuff, it's so much better if you have the computer chip that handled the sound, because it was that one could do the 4-channel sound, and it was stereo, and it was, I mean, to me the Atari 800 was a computer that was built way ahead of its time. The technology that it had at the time that it was made
Yeah.
versus what ultimately could be done with it. And people are still, I mean, it's amazing to me the whole homebrew market that exists now, the new games that they come out with for the 2600, for the 800, that people have just sat there and because with their massive knowledge now of computers today, they're able to kind of go backwards and reprogram the 800 and the 2600 for stuff that just blows me away. It's like, wow, that stuff, if that stuff had been around in the 70s, probably everyone would have owned an Atari, some of the stuff that they have now, you know.
I have about 20 uh, Atari games coming from Atari Age that should be here hopefully soon. Um, when they did their last chance sell off back in June and July, I learned about it literally the second to last day before it was over. And fortunately, I actually had some money at the time. I'm not known for having money, but I
Yeah.
did. So I bought a bunch of them, and I had a big birthday coming up. Yes, that number. But So I had some family members who were already asking me, "Is there anything you want for your birthday?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, can you buy me a couple of these Atari games?" So um,
What
it,
number are we talking about here? 50, 60,
um, uh, 25 twice.
25 twice? Look, I'm 56. You'll get over that number pretty well. And the only thing is that just whatever injuries you get from this point forward are likely to be permanent. That's the only thing I can tell you about post 50 existence, is that whatever you have now that isn't working, it's not going to work any better and probably is going to stay that way for the rest of your life. So be
Oh,
careful about that.
I will. I will try to watch out for that.
So what was your favorite game or your favorite games on the 5200 or 7800?
5200. Oh, without question, Rescue and Fractalus was my favorite.
I
Star
remember
Racer.
when it was Beyond Jagai Lines. That when it first came out for the Atari, well, what someone had done, someone had stolen it from Lucasfilm, and they stole the beta version of it, and so it was actually called Behind Jaggy Lines, Jaggi lines, because all the fractal stuff was all
Yeah,
jagged.
I think I read about that.
Yeah, so that's that. I played that back in the day when it was before it was all polished up and made into Rescue from
Never
Fractal.
seen it, but I think now that you say that, I think I did read that before.
Yes. See, I'm OG. I'm OG. It's too bad you didn't have the Atari ST. I would even talk to you about the ST line because I had one of those too.
I did not have that. Uh,
The one thing that the Atari did not have though was a wrestling game. That was like the
yes, it is.
one. What game did it have? Oh,
Well, it
Bop
had
and Wrestle. It had Bop and Wrestle, but that was horrible, and I could never get it to do anything.
Hop and Russell.
Yeah, Bop and Wrestle for the Atari. That yes.
Never heard of that one.
That they had that for I don't think they ever made it for the 5200 or 7800, but it was for the Atari computer. The
Oh, so for the 2600, they had Title Match Pro Wrestling.
oh yeah,
They had both. That was for both the 2600 and the 52, or excuse me, 7800. And then they had Matt Mania Challenge for the 7800. Neither one of them is particularly great, but uh, limited moves, limited sprites. But when you were hungry for wrestling, I was glad that they were there.
just and so you liked Rescue from Breakfast. Well, let me name me your favorite Synapse game. Come on, there's lots of great ones.
I'm not sure I know which ones they produced.
Examples are like Blue Max. You ever play Blue Max? The World War One flying game. A little World War One biplane that fantastic.
On which console?
Well, that's the thing is that I never did consoles. The only thing I ever owned was an Atari 800 and an Atari ST. So they're all 8-bit computer stuff. But the Synapse, you see, I don't know if they released any of their stuff for the 5200 or the 7800. Things like Seamus and Pharaoh's Curse and Zeppelin and Alley Cat and these may all have skipped all of your ones from
My 800 computer, like I said, it came from it was the son's or my dad's friend's son. It's his, and he was getting rid of it. And he had a box of floppy disks, and he had downloaded a bunch of um, games on these floppy, so they're all handwritten. So I don't know who made what of those.
got it. Well, the opening screen
Of those games, my two favorites, one of which was on the 5200. I like the Star Trek, was it Flight Simulator or whatever it was called, Star Trek, and then Ghostbusters.
yeah, that was a huge hit for a while. That was a lot of fun to play. And yeah, they're coming out with yet another Ghostbusters movie. So, maybe you can break it out and play a few, on an emulator or something like that to remind you of old times.
Well, I recently discovered that there was a 2600 game called Ghostbusters 2. Um,
Never
it
heard of
was,
it.
it was only released in Europe. It is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah.
On an Atari 2600 Pac-Man level or not?
Well, Pac-Man wasn't bad. It wasn't what you were expecting, so you were disappointed. This is just bad.
Wow.
It's just bad.
And have you seen the Game Over movie about the burying of the ET cartridges?
I've heard about that. No, I didn't. I didn't see any movie.
When you have a chance, and you got nothing better to do, go check that out. I know you would appreciate it. I know you'd find it very very entertaining, given your background with the Atari.
What does it say about the ET games?
Oh well, it talks about how the ET game was made, which was like they gave the poor guy like 2 weeks to make it. After and the build up to it, and then they go into the area where it's supposedly buried, and they go and they try to dig it up and see if they can find the seam of lost cartridges. It's like a quest for the Lost Ark, which would be whatever plot buried the entire collection of Atari ET cartridges. So I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to say whether they.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't one of those documentaries where they say ET, it ruined the whole game industry, it caused the video game crash, and all
No, but they do talk about its role in the crash, which it did have a role in it, but it didn't say
I don't
cause.
think it did. I've always felt that the game was ahead of its time, and people just didn't understand. To this day, people don't know how to play it. Once you learn how to play it, it's very addicting.
Really? Okay, that's
It's one of those games you had to read the manuals, and I understand when we're kids we just want to plug and play. But it's like Raiders of the Lost Ark. You've got to, if you don't read the manual, you won't know what you're doing.
And if it's Sword Quest, it's not, the manual is actually better than the game itself.
Yeah. I've always said that with this homebrew mark, somebody needs to make a game that's nothing but payoff. So when you with the Sword Quest thing, so whatever you're questing or whatever you're trying to find, I understand it can be multiple results on the same game. You got to find the right one, and then you use those whatever combination on this extra this new cartridge, and you'll just play a very short game, and then you'll get this huge payoff, whatever 2600 can do, and depending on the combination, you'll get a different payoff. But you got to play the other games to get the right to get whatever they give you, whatever symbol it is you come up with. Whether you're playing it right or wrong, who cares?
Well, yeah,
there's no reason to play it.
Well, yeah. Well, they were supposed to give you a jewel encrusted sword if you won Sword Quest. That was the whole thing. Was that if you played all 4 games and figured out all the puzzles, and you sent in a special code word to to Atari, or they were supposed to then send you back the winner would be put in the drawing, and you get the sword. But apparently, no one ever got through it, so they hawked the sword back to the company that set the whole thing up. So it was.
I don't think they ever released the 4th game.
No, they didn't, because it was like the Marvel, the MCU right now, and how they plan sequels, but now they're like, Eternals 2, we'd rather save the money.
I'm glad to hear that a lot of these movies are being canceled. I used to be a huge fan of superhero movies because they were few and far between. I am sick of them. I don't want to see anymore.
I said that too to some other friends of mine the other day, and they were like shocked. They're like, "You always love superhero stuff," and I'm like, "Yeah, but they haven't made a good one since like Avengers Endgame, and they just keep pumping out stuff that is just pap. It's just
like they've got this plan. Oh, we're going to make this movie, but we got to make these other 4 movies first before this one makes sense. So you're saying this isn't going to be a good movie unless you've got these other movies that aren't worth anything except explaining this movie.
Explaining, yeah.
Bomb, and I mean it's like backwards.
And like did you see the Eternals by any chance?
No, I did not.
My daughter is like my familiar. She like watches everything, and I'm like showing her all the great cultural movies of our time, like Rocky III and Die Hard and things like that. And so we watched Eternals for about 45 minutes, and I looked at her and I said, "Jane, do you understand anything that's going on in this movie right now?" And she said, "No." I said, "Jane, more importantly, do you care?" She's like, "No." And off the movie goes. So, and that kind of reminds me of the WWE booking these days, and maybe sometimes even the AEW booking. It's you ask yourself, why do I care about what's being done in the ring?
I really hate to say it, but yeah, there is so little emphasis on what's happening in the ring. There's no storytelling in the ring. All the storytelling is on the mic now. the ring action is just for the sake of it. In the old days, finishers were protected. You didn't hit your finisher unless you were going to pin somebody, and
Now finishers are chain moves.
Yeah, and everybody does the same thing. I mean, I remember when Sergeant Slaughter couldn't use the Cobra Clutch because DiBiase was already doing the $1 Million Dream, so he had to do his little drill nug.
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
And then he did the Camel Clutch for a while before he went back to the Cobra Clutch. But it's like only one person could do that move.
Or if another guy did it, then they would have a feud to see which one had the ultimate move. Like when Tito Santana started doing the figure four along with Greg Valentine, and they have the two of them would fight that with that specific move set up in mind, which was exciting. But yeah, now like a super kick, isn't a finisher now. It's literally like what the forearm smash used to be. Right.
Well, in the case of Tito Santana, his Valentine's history was breaking people's legs, and he attempted to break Santana's leg, although I don't think he did, but he injured him, and so that's why Santana learned the figure four to get revenge.
Right.
The move was better. It was, I'm going to get revenge on that. But
that was great, though. That build-up was a great feud, and it all focused on who could get the finisher on, and that sort of thing doesn't exist in wrestling now. I miss it. I miss that. I miss giant mass wrestlers that don't talk but just act like big bodyguards. The bodyguard type. I miss. I miss managers being sticky and cheesy, and I miss. I mean, kayfabe. I understand we can't have it, but the suspension of disbelief. What?
Who says we can't have kayfabe?
The internet says we can't have kayfabe. I know that thing. Maybe it'll go away.
Most of these internet smarks, they think they know everything and they don't. See, wrestling has two aspects. One end is the entertainment aspect. The other end is the sports aspect. WWE and AEW, most television, they focus on the entertainment aspect over that, and that's why we're talking about they don't focus on the ring. There's some good independent companies like Coastal Championship Wrestling that focuses on the sport aspect of it. No, they don't get on the internet and say, "I was scared to death when this fan came at me. Bret Hart hurt my feelings," like Seth Rollins does. They sit there. They're wrestlers. They focus on the sport of it, and you follow Coastal Championship Wrestling. And you're like, this is the way wrestling used to be, the way it used to be, the way it ought to be, and the way fans want it to be.
Wow. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's it's I can't believe it, but the hour has just drifted on by real fast, and I really appreciate having you on the show. Why don't you take a minute out and tell fans how they could get a hold of your social media links? I know you've kind of mentioned them before, but why don't you throw them all in together so that people can contact you if they're interested?
Well, they can reach me on Facebook through Sean Bossman, the boss of pro wrestling, and on Twitter at Sean Bossman, the boss of PW, because pro wrestling wouldn't fit, or the boss of pro wrestling on YouTube, the boss of pro wrestling on Instagram, and if you still have a MySpace, the boss of pro wrestling on MySpace. I checked not too long ago, even that still works.
My dog still has his MySpace page. He's been dead since 2015, but he still has his MySpace page.
And of course, my websites, I've got HulkHoganHistory.weebly.com, and I've also got my official website, thebossofprowrestling.weebly.com.
Wow. Well, this has been a great interview. I really appreciate it. When you have your next big project coming on, or you're going to be doing another big show, we'd love to have you on the show again. And maybe I'll have my other co-hosts in Mike Lino and Evan Ginsberg on to give you a couple of other interesting questions. But it's really been fun talking to you, and I really appreciate your willingness to do the show tonight.
I had a really great time. Thank you so very much for bringing me on.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. We'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone.